On the opposite side of the map, on the left, those are the fastest growing energy markets in the world, the hungriest energy markets in the world in East Asia, and between them is us. This little region that is historically been a backwater in energy markets, has historically not played a major role in coal, oil, or gas, but in the last 5 or 6 years has become maybe the single biggest story anywhere in North America. Certainly one of the biggest stories globally about what's going to happen to these industries. Because in order for those fuels on the right-hand side to find a market at all, in order for them to get combusted, they don't have natural markets in North America, they don't have natural markets they can get to economically anywhere else for reasons I'm not going to get into today. Those fuels need to find a way out. And the way out is between Coos Bay, Oregon, in the south of that green area, and between Prince Rupert, British Columbia, in the north. The pipeline routes, the rail routes, that's the only economical way they can get that stuff to market. If they can't get it through that green region right there, a region I like to call the thin green line, they will stay in the ground. Okay, so we're going to run through real quickly what's been on the table since, we're going to call it since 2012. If you're north of the border, our friends in Canada talk about these two projects more than we even talk about coal and oil. Those are the Northern Gateway, Northern Gateway oil pipeline in the north there, Kinder Morgan's big expansion project for a big oil pipeline in the south, both carrying Canadian tar sands to the coast for export. Huge projects, viciously contested, major backing from the oil industry. In addition to those two pipeline projects, for oil, we've seen at least, this is very conservative accounting, 6 new oil pipeline proposals to liquefy natural gas projects on the coast. These bring fracked gas, mostly out of the Canadian Rockies and the US Rockies to a lesser extent, where we compress and ship to Asia for export. This is actually a radical understatement of the projects right now. We have like 20 of them in Canada at this moment. In addition to those, which one is this slide? This is a too conservative accounting of coal export projects. Starting in 2011, 2012, we saw 6 new proposals for coal export terminals in Oregon and Washington, plus 4 new and expanded coal terminals in British Columbia, for a total of around 10 and call it 170 million metric tons of coal per year. In addition to the old stuff, all of these projects are new, right? This is not the existing fossil fuel infrastructure. These are oil train projects. We've seen 14 or 15, depending on how you do the math, oil train projects, almost all of them scheduled for Washington or very close by. Those are many of them clustered right there. All of these, I think many folks in this room have been interested in. If that seems like a lot of projects, that seems like a lot of stuff, it's because it is. And this is my barometer for sort of explaining how much these projects matter. So I'm going to show you a couple of bar charts today. This is the most important of them. On the left-hand side, right there, that's the Keystone XL pipeline. That's how much carbon would have flowed through Keystone on an annual basis. Like if that pipeline had been built, used at capacity, and all the oil in the environment, right? That's how much carbon would be emitted on an annual basis, okay? So, apples to apples comparison. On the right-hand side, these are new projects in the Northwest just since 2012 that have been proposed, okay? And I've stacked them up one after the other. On the bottom, natural gas pipelines, way too conservative accounting. On top of that, oil by rail, also too conservative. On top of that, oil by pipe. On top of that, coal terminals. All right? So that's like 5.5, 6 times as much carbon that would come through the Pacific Northwest in new projects that have been proposed since 2012. That's how it compares to Keystone. That's why the fights we're having here matter. That's why they matter more than almost any place else in North America, and that's why they matter more than almost any place else in the world. And that's why the stuff that we're talking about here in this room today makes such a big difference. All right, so different places in the region experience these fights in different ways. Canadians have been fighting about oil pipelines to an astonishing degree. If you're in Coos Bay, Oregon, you're having a big fight about a liquefied natural gas project in your neighborhood. Here in the Puget Sound region, mostly we've talked about coal trains and oil trains, and we have some folks in this room who've done a lot about oil trains in particular, so we're going to talk about that more than anything else in the next few minutes. But before I do that, actually no, let's do that now. Let's talk about the risk of oil trains, because this is what's been such a locus of activism, and what will likely be a locus of activism in the next few months and years. Forget about the environment for a second. Forget about carbon emissions. All right? Forget about global warming, and just think about the health and safety of your neighborhood, and your family, and your community. Because when an oil train derails and explodes, this is what it looks like. All right? This is downtown Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, after oil train derailed and exploded. Those are 4 city blocks of masonry buildings burned to the ground. All right? 47 people died who were at a bar that night in town. Thank God it happened late at night.
And the smokers were the ones who got saved because they were smoking.
Because they were outside.
And they
That's right.
walked, they were like, what's going on?
That's right. A few months later in Alabama, this train derailed, went into a marsh in Alabama. Catastrophically, this same rail line wants to haul oil to 3 projects in Grace Harbor. Shortly after that, this train blew up in eastern North Dakota. This one's on YouTube. You can listen to the Fargo accents talking about this one, which happened just outside Fargo. This one blew up. This one happened in New Brunswick the very next month, in a remote area, thank goodness. We had a pause of a few months. This one went off the rails in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia during lunch hour. Went into the James River where it spilled about 30,000 gallons of crude into the James River. That was a miracle. That was the good news. If that train had fallen the other way, that fellow would not be standing in that building right now. There's no question about it. And that was with the new safe tank cars. This was also with the new safe tank cars. This was carrying heavy Canadian crude oil, not previously believed to be explosive. It's not the Bakken shale oil. This one went off the rails on a remote stretch of track in northern Ontario at Valentine's Day weekend. Just 2 days later, that same weekend, this one went off the tracks in Mount Carbon, West Virginia. This one's also on YouTube. You can watch the TV news crew film the first flaming tank car while the other ones start to go up behind it. It's quite astonishing. It's quite scary. That one very nearly resulted in loss of life. We had a pause in just 1 month before another train carrying heavy Canadian crude, also with new safer tank cars, went off the rails in Ontario again. We had a pause of, oh no, that was just a week went by. And then this one went off the rails in rural Illinois. I like that shot because it gives you a really good perspective for what a fireball looks like when these things erupt. So if you imagine that in downtown Seattle, or anywhere else for that matter, you can imagine that there's not a way to address something like that. There's not a fire department on Earth who can deal with a fire like that in an urban area. This is what the fossil fuel industry has in mind for us, by the way. And then this one, this is the most recent one. This one went off the rails in western North Dakota. BNSF owned that rail line. The same company who owns the tracks right down here, bringing oil trains through on a daily basis right now. This train not only had the new safe tank cars, this train also had oil that met what they call the degasification standards. That means they had stripped out the volatile hydrocarbons in there, the volatile chemicals that are believed to contribute to combustion. And that's what it looks like. All right? This is not a safe industry. Fast trains, slow trains, old track, new track, hot weather, cold weather, we've seen it all, right? These trains are not safe fundamentally, and they have no intention of stopping that.
Quick question, can you address why you think there hasn't been one of these since last May?
I'll get into that Q&A.
Okay.
Okay, so I know I'm running a little bit short on time here. We've talked about coal, we've talked about oil a little bit, we've talked about natural gas. I think of this, from the perspective of Oregon and Washington, I think about 3 ways. I think about coal trains, I think about oil trains, and then the third wave in this tsunami is this one. This is fracked fuel and petrochemicals, for lack of a better term. These are the big methanol refineries that are proposed for Tacoma and for spots in the Columbia River. These are niche refining projects like xylene in Anacortes. These are big liquefied natural gas stations along the Oregon coast. This is the new stuff. This is stuff that's getting fracked out of the Canadian Rockies and then turned into something en route to export to Asia. This is the new wave that we'll be fighting over the next couple of years. This stuff is huge. We're just beginning to get our arms around how significant it is. And these are the fights we're having right now. I know we have some folks from Tacoma here. Tacoma has been probably the hottest spot we've seen maybe ever in these fights for this stuff. And it's astonishing how effective our friends in Tacoma have been. Okay, so now what do we do? This was supposed to be a 2-step slide, but we'll just do the whole thing at once. Here's the good news. Lou Sumas, another good friend of mine, who works, not really, but here's the point of having a conversation like the conversation we have today. Because the oil industry gets this. They know, the fossil fuel industry gets this completely. If you were to go to Gillette, Wyoming right now, or St. Louis, where Peabody Coal is headquartered, they would tell you, and they tell their investors this because they have to, what happens when they try to build a project here. Nothing happens. And that's why we assume this. thinks that's where energy projects are going to die. And I love this. I actually made this slide about 6 months ago, but what's so great is that the project he has proposed for Longview just died last week. So that's why I think of this map as a Rorschach test. This map is a depiction of an area that could get steamrolled by a highway of coal and oil bound for Asia. Or it could be the reef on which this stuff comes to grief. This could be the region that changes the nature of the global energy markets. And that's exactly what we've seen. Our friends in Canada, when confronted with multi-billion-dollar, well-capitalized projects in the oil industry, stood up and they fought against these projects for years and years against overwhelming odds. They fought with the First Nations, they fought with the environmentalists, they fought with local communities. And what happened, this is Ian Anderson, what an idiot. He's the CEO of Kinder Morgan Canada. He thought this project was so baked, and here he is complaining to the Vancouver paper about the overwhelming opposition, how tough it was to be him. Because he's going to lose that project. Just like the new Prime Minister Trudeau seems to have put the ice on the Northern Pipeline. That Southern Pipeline's not going to get built either, in my opinion. We've seen the same thing play out with coal export proposals. We originally had 6 in Oregon and Washington. 4 of them have gone down already. They will not come back. We have the 2 biggest of them remaining. We have one in Longview and one in Bellingham. Those are going to be up for public comment and public participation this spring and then this fall. These are hugely important. Together, these are almost 92 million metric tons of coal. They're enormous projects. They'd be the first and second biggest in North America. They're not dead yet. They're weak, but we have to make sure that these things go down in a big way. And there's every reason to believe that they will follow in the footsteps of the previous ones. And then, finally, with much thanks to some folks in this room here who have fought against oil trains so ferociously, we've seen the same thing start to happen with these oil train projects. We have seen, I don't think of Aberdeen as being a particularly sort of environmentally progressive place, but it turns out that when confronted with the risks, the dangers, and the threats of the oil industry, everybody's an environmentalist. And they've turned against that project in a big way. Of the 3 projects there, one's already died. We saw another project at Longview, which I just mentioned a second ago, and we're seeing the tide turn on this now too. It's the same thing that's happening with methanol refineries. We're seeing that when confronted with such ferocious opposition that the Northwest can bring, that these projects go down one after the other. They actually cannot fight a sustained grassroots citizen-based uprising. They just can't. And I'm going to say this as I close. Of all the projects that I've mentioned, of all those projects that I put up there, not one has been contested. A couple of refineries got some railroads built before we were aware of them. Not one single project that has faced opposition has been built. Every single one of them has been killed or delayed. The costs have doubled and tripled and gone up. And I think there is reason to believe that we're going to run the tables on these guys. I think we're going to play a shutdown defense in this region. I think we can stop every single one of these projects from getting built.
Thank you very much, Eric. And that really sums it up. Asking people to break the law is not something that